Welcome to the show, everyone. This is another edition of your voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. This is Beyond Reason Radio, and I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We are on till 8 to 10 p.m. tonight right here live on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. You can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, and we have, well, for some strange reason, we have Mr. Tom Benson producing. I thought yesterday was your last night, Tom Benson.
So did I. I thought I was going to win the big lottery.
You didn't win?
No, I didn't. So here I am today. And you know what the saddest thing about it all is?
What's that?
I had you written down for $1 million.
Really?
Yes.
Dang it.
I was going to give you $1 million.
Man. Oh, man. I thought you were a shoo-in. I mean, you didn't buy just one ticket.
I bought 3.
You bought 3.
3.
I mean, I thought after that, it was just inevitable that you were going to win, and then I was going to get $1 million.
Yep. But it didn't work out. Here I am, still back again with my brown bag lunch.
I saw that.
My tattered jeans. and a mountain of debt.
Do you have a stick? What are the hobos in the old cartoons used to have, the stick with the little
a walking stick?
Yeah,
sure.
stick.
Yeah, I got that.
as you travel on the railroads throughout America.
Hey, but there is good news tonight.
What's that?
Well, there's good news and bad news, actually.
Okay.
The good news is Hurricane Harvey is not here.
Yes. Although I do have some listeners, believe it or not, that live in the Houston area.
Oh, really?
Because we play on, they play the podcast on Liberty Free Texas.
Okay.
I think I actually butchered that name, but they play the podcast out there. And, I know I have some listeners out there, so I hope they're going to be all right. There's going to be some flooding out there.
Yeah, we really hope so. Some areas could get around 15 inches of rain or more in the Houston area. And it's going to go as far inland as San Antonio. They're going to get a bunch of rain, too. And the bad news, of course, is for us, although we're not in the path of the storm, is the gasoline prices are going to go up. You could be sure of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because the refineries are closed down, shut down, for the storm. And
this does not make me happy, Tom Benson.
They use any excuse they can to raise it.
By the way, it's Liberty Radio Texas. You go to libertyradiotexas.com. The podcast plays Thursdays on their live stream.
We wish them well.
Yeah, hopefully they're going to be all right. It kind of came out of nowhere, right? I don't think. I mean, it's. Yeah, I guess it was kind of in there, but it became a big storm.
Well, the Gulf waters are very warm, and it just regenerates again, and it's moving north. Because originally they thought this thing was going to go west,
right,
through the Yucatan into
Mexico.
That's
what I thought. Yeah, and now we have a storm kind of off the Florida coast. It's kind of like a tropical disturbance,
yes.
I guess.
Yeah, so we could get some heavy thunderstorms, I guess.
But that could move into the Gulf.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
But once that moves into the Gulf, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, the projections I saw on it was supposed to make like a U-turn over Florida and go back out over the Atlantic.
Like Hurricane Charlie.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
Oh, great. Oh, thanks. That's lovely. I can't wait. All right. So I actually want to start out the show tonight with some good news, believe it or not. Believe it or not, yes, there is actually good news out there that we can start out Beyond Reason Radio with. As you know, if you've listened to this show recently, a big passion of mine has been defending freedom of speech. Defending speech, being able to assemble, being able to say what you want without the fear of violence, without the fear of your speech being shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, this has been happening on both sides. Now, it's much more extreme on the left right now with AntiFa. And we're going to get into a CNN report with AntiFa. I played a little bit of it on the morning show a couple days ago, but since we have more time in this show, I'm going to play the whole report. It's actually from CNN, believe it or not. It was actually played during Jake Tapper's show, and it's a pretty honest report about the violence and the danger of that group, AntiFa. So AntiFa is kind of the extreme, but I also criticized a lot of Trump supporters who were very supportive. Do you remember that Shakespeare play? When the Shakespeare play came out and it kind of depicted assassinating Trump.
Got it. Uh-huh.
And you had some Trump supporters that went to that play and totally interrupted the play. Mm-hmm. And totally tried to shut it down, yell it down so they couldn't do it. And I actually criticize them for doing that because I support, while I don't like the play, I don't like what the play was doing, I support their right to be able to have the play. I support their right to be able to say those things and have speech without having to be totally interrupted and shut down.
Free speech should be a two-way street.
Exactly. So this definitely goes on. And then I also talked about a poll recently where a lot of Republicans think certain media outlets should be shut down because they're, not fair or they're not objective or whatever. And I said, that's not a good thing either. So we have that. But on the left right now, you have this really extreme example of Antifa. And yet we've seen a lot of leftists out there kind of support Antifa, saying, well, we usually don't like violence, but they're punching Nazis. So since they're punching Nazis, it's okay. We can support them. They're just like the soldiers of World War II going into the beaches of Normandy. They're like the same thing, right? Right, Tom Benson?
The beaches of Normandy, the streets of Charlottesville. I kind of, I can see that.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, you're right. But there is some good news on this because it was kind of disturbing to hear that. And frankly, I have listeners of this show who think it's okay that what Antifa was doing in Charlottesville. And it's not just Charlottesville. Charlottesville was one instance. They've been doing a lot more way before Charlottesville in the past year or so, especially since Trump has become president. And it's very dangerous precedent what they're doing. And when we play the report, it's going to really go over a lot of it. And it kind of disturbed me how many people were supportive of it. So, and the dangerous trend is they're just going to encourage more violence from the crazy Nazi white supremacists. So you're going to have crazy Nazi white supremacist violence. You're going to have crazy communist Antifa violence, and it's just going to be insane. But we have to support free, and all of this is an attempt to shut down someone else's speech. And I said, if there's one thing we should be able to unite around in this country, and I'm pleading to my friends on the left as well. Believe it or not, I do have friends on the left. I'm pleading to my friends on the left, support me on this, support me in nonviolence, and support me on supporting free speech. Well, the good news is there's a poll out from Rasmussen. Rasmussen has a new poll that says 85% of Americans thinks free speech more important than political correctness. Nearly 9 out of 10 Americans think freedom of speech is more important than political correctness, and 73% say they defend free speech to their deaths, a new poll shows. Just 8% think it's most important to make sure no one gets offended. That's according to Rasmussen reports released on Wednesday. Some 85% agreed that giving people the right to free speech is more important than making sure no one is offended by what others say. 73% agree with the famous line by the 18th century French author Voltaire, "I disapprove of what you say, but will defend to the death your right to say it." That's something I've said before. Only 10% disagree with that statement, but 17% are undecided. Among Americans who agree with Voltaire, 93% rate freedom of speech as more important than making sure no one is offended. That compares to just 69% of those who disagree with the French author's maxim. Now, the whole point of this is good news. This really is, because the way you've seen the political debate lately, you would think free speech is out the window.
Yeah.
You would think we are headed down a road where no one wants to be offended, where free speech is out the window, where we can stop speech and violently stop it because, well, it's not, the community has decided, the collective has decided, the government has decided, whatever it is, that it shouldn't be allowed. And I talked about how that's a dangerous road because, who decides that? You want the mob to decide it? You want the government to decide it? Who do you want to decide it? And when you give them that much power, that's dangerous. And eventually they're going to come after you. But Americans don't think they have freedom of speech now. The poll found just 28% of Americans believe they have true freedom of speech today, and most think the country is too politically correct. It says there is a rare partisan agreement on freedom of speech. Most Americans, regardless of political affiliation, agree they would defend someone's right to say something, even if they don't agree with it. Although Democrats are slightly less sure than Republicans and those not affiliated with either major party. The majority across the political spectrum also agree that free speech is more important than making sure no one's offended. So some good news. And then there's some more good news on this front. Believe it or not, there's actually some prominent leftists out there. And when I say leftists, I mean like practically socialist leftists out there who are not happy with what Antifa is doing.
Great.
Now, when Antifa was interrupting speeches on college campuses, I actually played audio from Bill Maher and Bernie Sanders, I believe, who both denounced what was going on there, that was happening. Said
I remember,
it shouldn't happen. So that's good. But more recently, leftist communist professor Noam Chomsky, he talked with a Washington Examiner. He's a big, communist intellectual out there. He even believes that Antifa is dangerous. And not only that, but he told the Washington Examiner that Antifa and these radical violent groups are a gift to the alt-right and a gift to these white supremacist groups. He says, as for Antifa, it's a minuscule fringe of the left, just as its predecessors were. He says it's a major gift to the right, including the militant right, who are exuberant. He says what they do is often wrong in principle, like blocking talks, and the movement is generally self-destructive. He says when confrontation shifts to the arena of violence, it's the toughest and most brutal who win, and who knows who that is. He says that's quite apart from the opportunity cost, the loss of the opportunity for education, organizing, and serious and constructive activism. Now, this is someone that I really don't ever agree with on anything. I've watched some videos of him recently. I mean, he's very radical socialist. He hates big corporations. He basically hates American capitalism. Says workers out there are basically slaves to their businesses. He says stuff like that. He says there was a group on this side. You can call them the left. You've just called them the left. They came violently attacking the other group. That's what Trump was saying in response. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is. And Trump was right on that. So you have a poll out there that shows that the majority of Americans still believe in free speech. Thank God. If we can unite around that, at least if something in this country we can unite around is that, maybe that's a good thing. And then you have prominent leftists like Noam Chomsky who are coming out and saying we have to denounce what this radical Antifa group is doing. So some good news for you on Beyond Reason Radio. So speaking of the Antifa group, the CNN did a really in-depth report where they had a reporter. It was actually played during Jake Taber's of the Lead, believe it or not. And they had a reporter who went out and talked with Antifa and did a whole thing on Antifa and talked about people who are in that movement and everything in the history of that movement. And it shows how dangerous they are. But it was a pretty honest report. I think it's very revealing on what they think and why they are incredibly dangerous for this country. So we're going to get into that. And I also have my voice of reason of the day on this. And we have a lot more to get to. I have stories so beyond reason, you just can't make them up. And things that made Yaffee laughy as well, and much more. So we'll get into all of that. You can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
So there's a great opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal by a guy by the name of William Galston. And he talked about free speech, and he actually talked about how they're trying to suppress it in China. But then he says 7,000 miles to the east, talking about us, of course, the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, Virginia sparked calls for the suppression of hate speech, bigoted rhetoric that any decent observer would condemn. Racism and anti-Semitism have no place in any society, and certainly not in a society dedicated to the proposition that all humans are created equal. If these doctrines contain no truth and yield only ill effects, runs the argument, why not prohibit their expression? He said this has been seen pretty much in academia and other stuff, and he says this is a dangerous precedent. He says one of the few clear lessons of history is that vesting any authority with the power to control speech is bound eventually to backfire. Firm adherence to the First Amendment enables public officials to impose reasonable time, place, and manner conditions on speech and act to preempt the violence that may attend free expression in fraught situations. Government should go no further. Not in China, not in America, not anywhere. And I couldn't agree more. I had a great piece on there. But there is a group out there that we've been talking about. The anti-fascists is what they call themselves, even though their tactics are very fascist. I mean, it's right out of the Nazi brown shirts playbook, what they're doing. And they're called, AntiFa. And I found this report. It was actually on Facebook. Someone posted it, but it's by CNN. It was by a journalist by the name of Sarah Ganim. And believe it or not, this was played on Jake Tapper's The Lead. They actually went a couple minutes without bashing Trump and bashing his speech. I know, shocking, and bashing white supremacists, and actually decided to do an in-depth look on Antifa. Now, I played a little bit of this on the morning show when I hosted on Monday, I believe, Monday or Friday. But I didn't have time to play the whole thing because the thing is about 5 minutes long. But I want to play the whole thing now, and I want to go through it with you and react to it because there's so much here that's really important that you need to understand because, when Trump said there's violence on many sides and there was other people that were violent, when you heard the journalists react to him saying that, you would have thought they had never heard of Antifa. You would have thought they never even knew of any other side, that it was all just violence from white supremacists and they need to be condemned. And who cares about any other side? But we should care. There's a reason why we should care. There have been Nazi rallies my whole life and white supremacist rallies my whole life. And most of them were pretty marginal, just like this one's pretty marginal, and most people just ignored him. They might protest him, but they basically just ignored him. But what happened in Charlottesville is you had another group that said we can't just ignore them or protest them. We have to act violently against them. So what this does is sparks violence in the streets. And that's not good. It just creates more violence. It just creates more fire. And that's where the real problem lies. So, and it's just like Noam Chomsky said, it just gives credence. It just helps. It's a gift to those groups when you act violently against them. That's what they want. They want the war. So let's go through this report as she actually talks to, she goes to basically an Antifa meeting, and they're all there and they're all covering their faces. That's what they do with masks and everything, and talks to one of their leaders. And let's go through it. Here it is.
It's 6 a.m. in Portland, Oregon, and we're headed to a bar with blacked out windows.
They wanted to meet us really early in the morning because they're concerned about a lot of people being around.
We are meeting members of the Rose City Antifa, short for anti-fascist. This group's main goal is to disrupt neo-Nazis and white supremacists, but also take on government and capitalism.
Antifa is any group that's willing to stand up against fascists by any means necessary.
By any means necessary, they say, can mean outing a white nationalist at their work or to their neighbors. Or, as we've seen recently, violence, fires, property damage, hand-to-hand combat at protests across the country.
Explain to me the reasoning behind fighting.
You have to make it so unpalatable to be doing white supremacist organizing that they no longer want to do that. And historically, that's what's worked. You have to put your body in the way.
Okay, stop right there. No. Historically, that's not what's worked. In fact, a lot of times that stuff just creates more violence and more civil war. Well, historically, no. Violence is not what works. Non-violence does work. All right, let's continue on.
You have to make it speak in a language that they understand, and sometimes that is violence.
What about people who will say that it is their right to free speech, even if it's hate speech?
But we do think that communities have the right to step in and say, no, this is not acceptable in our community. We will not stand for this.
So there's an element of...
Okay, stop right there. What a collectivist mindset. I mean, really, that's a Marxist collectivist mindset. So the United States of America was founded on the idea of, yes, the people have a say in their government. and they vote in their government, but it was also founded on the idea of individual liberty and minority rights. Individual liberty, where the individual has a right to certain things. They have a right to private property. They have a right to life. They have a right to freedom of speech, even if the majority disagrees with it. That's what America was founded on. But this group is different. You can hear it. This is a collectivist mindset where they believe the community, the collective, basically, should be able to dictate what speech is okay. This is a very dangerous road. And not only that, but they believe the community should be able to get violent against speech they disagree with. That sounds good until the community. What if the community was racist? Oh, then all of a sudden you wouldn't like that. You wouldn't like the community dictating what kind of speech was okay. Maybe we should focus on what's right, what's correct, what's good over what the community wants. All right, she continues.
Distrust of the government here, right? An element maybe of anarchism.
People in our group come from across the left spectrum. We have people that are anarchists, we have people that are socialists, we even have people that are like liberals or social democrats.
One of the principles is that you're not going to wait for the government to act.
We don't rely on the cops or the courts to do the work for us.
There's no firm number on how many
stop right there. They don't rely on the cops or the courts to do what they want. Who thinks this is a good thing? There's a reason why, for one, that takes away the idea of justice being blind. That's why true justice, that's why when you have problems, you don't just do revenge on your own, but you have cops and you have a justice system that goes through it and does an actual punishment based on the rule of law and based on a jury. But this is good. They say, well, that's not good enough. We're going to do it on our own.
They feel they can be vigilantes when it fits their need.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. They see themselves as a vigilante group going around the government. This is not good. All right, continue on.
Activists there are in the U.S. because there isn't any one organization. Most are local groups that recruit and communicate through social media. But experts who track these organizations say their membership is growing in response to the rise of white national groups and the election of President Donald Trump.
Okay, stop right there. They might be growing to that, but I think the biggest reason they're growing is social media. It's just easier just like it's easier for the alt-right to organize because of social media, it's easier for these groups to organize because of social media. It's something our society is still trying to figure out how to deal with social media. It's a very difficult subject because it's a very new technology, and anytime you introduce new information technology like that into a society, it can create some kind of unrest. All right, they continue on.
Violence and property destruction led to more than 200 arrests in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. Prosecutors say they were wearing masks covered head to toe in black, a tactic the AntiFa call black bloc.
Okay, stop right there. So there was someone who commented on my Facebook when I was talking about AntiFa, and they said, well, as far as I know, AntiFa only counter-protests. This is obviously proof that that's not true, because they interrupted the inauguration of President Trump. That wasn't a counter-protest. That was interrupting an inauguration of a president. That's very different. This is a dangerous group that doesn't just counter-protest. They want to silence speech and a side they disagree with through violence. It continues on.
For a few things. One,
Scott Crow has been leading anarchist and militant leftist groups for decades.
so people put on the masks so that we can all become anonymous. And then therefore we are able to move more freely and do what we need to do, whether it is illegal or not.
So some people will push back on that and say that the black bloc is to keep people from being identified and arrested when they break the law, when they commit crimes.
Damn right. It's a good way to avoid the ramifications of law enforcement.
It's also to avoid the far-right groups they're fighting and the harassment that each side often engages in. We saw that firsthand at a May Day protest in New York City.
Let's stop right there. I just find it fascinating, too, how this group really tries to take away the value of the individual. Has anyone noticed that? By what they were talking about black, I guess they call it blackballing, or they put on the masks and everything. they are taking away the value of the individual. It's about the group. It's about the collective. And not only that, I mean, they don't have the guts to stand up and say who they are and what they believe. They have to hide in the shadows and then commit violence instead of actually believing an individual thought and really standing up for what you believe and putting your reputation on the line if you have to. That's real courage, not what they're doing. It continues on.
Cover our face because the Nazis will try to find out who we are. And that is a very bad thing because they harass people. They're the ones. They say that we're the evil ones. And you guys in the media, you always tell us, oh, they're trying to fight for their free speech. We're trying to stop them from organizing. We're not trying to stop them from their free speech. Because when they organize, they kill people, they hurt people, they fight people.
Okay, stop right there. That's not true. It's just not true. Not only is Antifa, organized and done violence against white supremacists, they've also done violence against everyday Republicans. There was a regular Republican parade in Portland that they threatened violence for. They threatened violence of Ann Coulter at Berkeley. They were at Trump's inauguration and had violence. None of that was stopping the organization of white supremacists and trying to stop their violence. All of this, it was to stop freedom of speech and speech they disagree with. And Nazis, yes, they're evil, but they believe in fighting evil with even more evil, which is not good, as the Bible often says a lot. Okay, it continues on.
And we're the ones who are fighting back. They are the second coming of Hitler.
Police in Berkeley told us they haven't seen this kind of destruction since the 1960s. Law enforcement in other cities are dealing with similar situations, like in Portland, Oregon, where Antifa have been involved in at least 10 protests ending in violence, according to police. And it's wearing on the community.
It is new. It's like this rumble mentality of, I'm going to bring my friends, you bring your friends, and we're going to fight it out in the park. It's not something we've seen here. It's not good for the city. People are just frustrated by it. It's
okay, stop right there.
Their livability. It's affecting their business.
Has it?
So it's funny, too, how Antifa says they're doing this on behalf of the community. And what they're actually doing is interrupting communities more than anything. So the vast majority of the people in these communities hate them just as much as they hate the white supremacists, because they come out, they destroy their communities, they commit violence. So they say, oh, we're just doing this on behalf of the community and fighting the evil other side. But they're not. They have their own agenda that's anti-American, anti-capitalist, a lot of times anti-government, anti-police. And they're just interrupting. And that's why I talked on my show a few weeks ago how these radical groups are ripping us apart when the vast majority of Americans don't subscribe to either of these sides or any of these radical groups. Even though Antifa would like to make you think different. Okay, it continues on.
Become more violent.
It happens quicker. The fire starting that we saw on May Day is something we haven't really seen much of in the past. The running through the street, breaking windows and everything in sight. We haven't seen it as consistently as we've seen it in the last 8 months.
In the 1990s, protesters used black bloc tactics during the Seattle World Trade Organization protests, and in the 2010s, the Occupy Wall Street movement.
What they're trying to do now is not only become prominent through violence at these high-profile rallies, but also to reach out through small meetings and through social networking to cultivate disenfranchised progressives who heretofore were peaceful.
But it's the violence that's gotten them attention, directly confronting groups that preach white nationalist rhetoric, like on Inauguration Day, when white nationalist Richard Spencer was punched in the face. And it was the Antifa movement that caused Berkeley to cancel speeches by extreme right provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos.
Violence is a necessary part of their message because they believe that elites are controlling the government and the media. So they need to make a statement head on against people who they regard as racist.
If there are the more hardcore elements, the white supremacists and neo-Nazis that go to these rallies that are itching for a fight, we're there to say, we'll stand in your way.
This is such baloney. that, oh, they're responding to the other side who is itching for a fight. No, this group's itching for a fight just as much. They are. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. I have my voice of reason of the day next. It's Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
So, Tom Benson, you actually brought up a great point in the break.
I did? Oh.
Yes, believe it or not, you did. No, but you brought up a great point in the break about AntiFa and the members of AntiFa.
Yeah, I was wondering, where they work.
I want to know the same thing, to be honest.
The very beginning of the report, she mentioned that they were meeting in a darkened room in the morning. Well, in the morning, most people are getting ready to go to work.
You would think so.
So
I mean, a lot of these people are young, though, so I bet you they're in college not working.
Oh, well.
I bet you they're actually spoiled brat rich kids who their parents pay for their college and everything, and they have time to do all this stuff.
Now, when I was in college years ago,
yes,
we had floors.
Back
years ago,
when you had to take the horse and buggy to
that's
school.
Right.
Okay.
And I walked uphill in the snow both ways.
Yes.
I spent a lot of my time in the student union playing ping pong. Not
causing violence in the streets.
No, not breaking windows.
It didn't really occur to you to cause violence in the streets in college, huh?
It didn't. It did not.
Well, I spent a lot of my time working. I actually had a job in college, so I definitely did not have time to have violence in the streets. And when I wasn't working, I was volunteering at my church. So, yeah, there you go. I think they could find better things to do with their time, frankly. So I wanted to play my voice of reason of the day here. And it's none other than Julie Borowski. Now, she's sort of famous for doing YouTube videos. She's a libertarian. She's young. I think she's like around my age. I actually saw her speak one time when I went to an event in South Florida. And very good, very smart. But she's kind of famous for doing these libertarian videos out there. And she did a little video recently, which she posted on YouTube and her Facebook. And she said on Facebook that YouTube would not let her put any ads on it because they thought it wasn't worthy to have ads or something because of the nature of this video. When you watch the video, that's just beyond reason to me. They did that to her. But I thought I would play it here because it's really good. She talks about the idea of what we've been talking about, nonviolence. Here it is.
I'm against Nazis. I know, such a brave thing to say. I also hate cancer, traffic, and man buns. The question is, are we allowed to punch Nazis? Look, I don't care what you say. We all got a list of people that we would just love to punch in the face. Just, but we don't, because we're somewhat civilized human beings. The problem with punching Nazis is that they have freedom of speech. Do they really, though? Yes, all of your political enemies, no matter how wrong or offensive, have freedom of speech. Thankfully, we live in a country that allows freedom of expression so we can determine the best ideas. We also live in a country that allows us to ignore, debate, protest, mock, disassociate with people with bad ideas. And despite what the media may have you believe, neo-Nazis are an extremely small group in America. Like 0.000 something %. Yet, if anyone is concerned about that number growing, violence is definitely not the answer. Violence only adds fuel to the fire and enables them to pretend to be the good guys. And normal people see the violence and want nothing to do with either side. Also, there is a problem with identifying Nazis. Is everyone who shows up at these rallies Nazis? Do they have the same agenda? Are there people legitimately there for free speech? Because you definitely don't want to misidentify a Nazi. To recap, Nazis are bad. Punching people for disagreeing is bad. Even communist. I know, it's hard. Disclaimer, there is an exception for self-defense, of course. Don't be stupid. Hope that helps. Bye.
I think that does help. To sum it up, Nazis are bad. And punching people you disagree with, bad. Gee. I mean, you wouldn't think that would be too controversial, but in today's world, who knows? 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We'll end the hour with stories so beyond reason. Well, you just can't make them up. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, joined by Tom Benson producing. We are on until 10 p.m. tonight. If you're listening to the live show here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. And we are on Facebook Live as well. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, or you can send me a friend request on Facebook. Search Michael Yaffee. I will accept it. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. So I thought I'd end the shower. I'm not in a shower. The show. I thought I guess the show is kind of like a shower from the craziness of the world. There we go. Write that down. New liner for us. No, but I thought I would end the show. Like I do sometimes. Stories so beyond reason you just can't make them up.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
Yes. So this story is actually kind of funny. ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, they're in some trouble today. Not for stuff they should be in trouble for, but because of something they put on Twitter. So they decided that they were going to do this campaign on Instagram and Twitter where they put up, a picture. What they decided to do is they put up a picture of a toddler. Mm-hmm. And it said, under it, the caption said this: "This is the future that the ACL members want." So it has a picture of a toddler, and the toddler's wearing like a shirt that says free speech. And the toddler's wearing holding an American flag.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Yeah, you would think so. Obviously, their point is they want
a future for our kids
that involves patriotism and free speech.
Absolutely.
Well, that's no. You cannot have that. You know why? Why this picture is so bad? Why they had to take it down and retract it?
No, tell me.
Because the kid's white. Oh, and blonde, by the way. White and blonde.
Oh, Aryan youth.
Yes, that's obviously what the ACLU meant, right? It had to have been. That was all it took. A flurry of tweets from ACLU followers slammed the group, suggesting it was being racially insensitive and even likening the post to pro-Nazi commentary.
There you go.
So, yeah, somebody at Black Autonomous tweeted back, says, "Luke looks pretty fash," kind of like fascist.
Yeah.
And then put up a picture of a toddler in a Nazi uniform. Another person responded, "A white kid with a flag? That's what you want, ACLU?" And
so in other words, they should have had a white kid, a black kid, an Asian kid, and a transgender all in the picture. Four kids.
Who knows?
Playing tag.
Who knows? Playing tag. No, tag's probably offensive in some way. You have winners and losers in tag.
It's violence because you have to touch someone.
Exactly right. So ACLU responds, and they put out, "When your Twitter followers keep you in check and remind you that white supremacy is everywhere." And they have a little GIF of Kermit the Frog saying, "That's a very good point." And then they followed up another tweet, said, "PSA, the future we want is babies in ACLU onesies. For more cute ACLU babies, follow us on Instagram." And they had a bunch of different pictures of different ACLU babies in different onesies that were not, I don't think they were all white. But it doesn't matter. Obviously with the ACLU, because everything's about race now, instead of about what the actual picture means. Everyone gets offended. Okay, another story that's so beyond reason that you just can't make them up. And this story really scares the hell out of me, Tom Benson. I don't.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
Weird Cuba incidents that I'm sure you heard about this.
Oh, yeah.
Left U.S. diplomats with brain injuries.
Mm-hmm.
American diplomats treated after a series of unexplained incidents in Havana had health problems, including mild traumatic brain injury and central nervous system damage, according to medical records seen by CBS News. So they talked about some kind of acoustic attack. We had diplomats in Cuba and some kind of acoustic attack. They don't know by who, by the way. Could have been the Russians, the Cubans, who knows?
I have the solution.
Ooh, yes, go ahead.
Just as they used to have parakeets in the coal mines to sniff for gas, if the parakeet keels over, the miners got out. All you need now are some dogs in the embassies.
Ooh.
Who are, because they're sensitive to that kind of stuff. And if they start going nutso, you have to put your earplugs in.
That's a great point. Now, it's sad we've come to this point. Mm-hmm. Did you even know this was possible?
No, this is the new one.
When this came out, I was like, what is happening?
It sounds like something you'd see in a movie.
Yes, it sounds like, one of James Bond's villains would have some kind of weapon like this.
Yeah.
You didn't think you would actually see this. And I hope that it really was an attack and it's not some crazy virus that's out there that's going to turn us all into zombies. I feel like this is how the zombie apocalypse starts. Just a few people somewhere have some kind of weird disease like this.
Well, when I first heard about this, I said, well, I wonder if there's something in the water that they're drinking. And that got me to thinking, how do they protect themselves from the local environment in these embassies? Do they all drink nothing but bottled water?
Probably.
Or process it some way?
I don't know. We need to find someone who's worked in an embassy and ask them.
There you go.
Because I have not worked in an embassy, so I don't know. The diplomats, some of whom ended up having to leave Cuba, were treated by an American doctor after complaining of symptoms including hearing loss, headaches, and loss of balance. Sources say the diplomats who lived in homes provided by the Cuban government began experiencing symptoms in the fall of 2016. 10 diplomats were affected. They were unprecedented and caused a variety of symptoms. And they still don't really know what happened. The FBI said they're taking the matter very seriously and investigating what's going on in Cuba. But all I know is this story scares the hell out of me. Because how in the world, other than what you said, the dog thing, how in the world do you protect against something like this? You can't see it coming. Ugh, craziness. All right, the first hour is done. In the second hour, I want to get into more talk on Afghanistan. I talked about that earlier in the week. I want to get to some more truth on that and some more stuff. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. One more hour to go. We'll be right back.
That nothing comes from indifference. I look inside of
Yes, one more hour to go of your voice of reason, of Orlando Smart Talk Radio, of your cold shower at the end of the day that you need after the craziness of the world. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. If you're listening to the live show, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. You can even go to the website, 1025WFLA.com. It's up there. You can go to BeyondReasonRadio.com. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, or you can follow me on Twitter at BeyondReasonR. And believe it or not, for some strange reason, Tom Benson's here.
Yeah.
I was told yesterday was your last night. I was getting all prepared. I was very somber and sad.
I remember saying that, yeah.
Because
I was going to win the Powerball. Well,
yes.
Guess what? I just got a call from the Powerball people, the official.
Yeah, I'm sure you did, yes.
They called up and they said, Tom, we did not make a mistake. You did not win.
What did you call them? And
Yes.
say,
I said, how can this be? I had 3 chances.
I mean, when you said you bought 3 whole tickets,
Yeah.
I thought it was a shoo-in that you were in.
Out of about, what, 280 million chances?
So, but I did hear that if you won, the amount of money you won was more than the chance to win, than your chances of winning.
That's right.
So you would have won more money than your total chances of winning.
And like I said last hour, 1 million of it was for you.
Yes.
So,
oh, man. So what would you have done with the other 600 million?
Instantly have a lot more friends.
People coming out of the woodwork.
Yes.
Yes. All right. I appreciate you all listening to the show. If you want to call, you can call 407-916-5400 or you can text to 23680. So if you listened to my show earlier this week, I did an extensive hour on Trump's plan for Afghanistan. And we went through pretty much a lot of his speech. And we had some brutal honesty about what I think the truth is in Afghanistan. And if you missed any of that show, well, there's this thing called the podcast. I know, isn't 21st century so great?
Man.
You can just go and listen to it now. Well, don't listen to it now because you have to listen to me now. And then listen to that later. And your life will be better for it. You won't even need to win the Powerball to make your life better. You can just win by listening to this show. Does that make you feel better, Tom Benson?
I do. Yes, I'll listen. I'll listen to it on the drive home.
You're totally lying to me. Winning the Powerball doesn't even compare to this show in your mind. I understand. No, but one thing I said, and this is just frankly how I feel. We are not getting out of Afghanistan anytime soon. Mm-hmm. This is what I just feel is the fact, is the reality. The military, President Trump, whoever you want to blame, when you look at the realities on the ground, when you look at what would happen if we just leave Afghanistan, when you look at all of those things, you look at our history there and how many terrorist groups are there and how Afghanistan is right next to Iran and Iraq and Syria's over there in that area and Russia's in that area and Pakistan and India. Strategically, it's important, but just the fact that we cannot create another vacuum in the Middle East. Even though Trump campaigned on saying he was going to leave Afghanistan, and he even said in his speech, one of my first instincts was to get out. I never, ever thought that we were going to leave Afghanistan. When Trump said it, I said, nope, not going to happen. We are not going to leave. I'm sorry. In fact, I don't think we're going to leave anytime soon. I think we're going to be there for the foreseeable future. We need a base presence in Afghanistan. Now, those who want to complain about it, we have more troops right now in South Korea. We have more troops in Japan. We have more troops in Germany. We have more troops in other countries in Europe than we do in Afghanistan. That's just a fact. It's kind of the realities of a situation like that when you deal with a country like that and you go to war with a country like that. We really did win the war to begin with, but stabilization and continuing to have an effect there, you're going to need a presence there, I think. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality. And none of our political leaders are willing to admit that to you. They're just not. And even Trump is really not willing to admit that completely. I found an article from John Dempsey in Time magazine. He was a senior advisor to the State Department from 2010 to 2016. He criticizes Trump's plan for the war, saying that the Trump administration needs to be clear about what the end goal is. Because Trump said this, we will win. He says we will win is insufficient. The president announced some tactical changes like ending micromanagement from Washington, giving our military members the tools they need, and expanding their authorities to obliterate the enemy. So is the definition of victory the killing of all terrorists in the region? Even if that were possible, what conditions need to be in place so that once we leave, new terror groups don't spring up? And how will we achieve our new military objectives with a few thousand more troops when we couldn't win with a combined 140,000 strong U.S. and NATO force just a few years ago. It says Trump was right to declare that the consequences of a hasty exit from Afghanistan are both predictable and unacceptable. So too are the consequences of a strategy that focuses overwhelmingly and disproportionately on increasing firepower and killing terrorists. He claimed that a fundamental pillar of this strategy and the integration of American economic, diplomatic, and military power. He then ignored diplomacy and economics, focusing almost entirely on crushing our enemies and threatening Pakistan. The reason why I bring this up is I don't agree with everything he's saying there. But the fact is, he's right in this sense. Trump is saying, well, we're going to win. And this sounds great. But what does winning look like? I don't think we really understand what winning looks like. Because what we're expecting is sort of a VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day, or Victory in Europe Day like we had after World War II, where there was just this one day, and that was the victory day where we declared victory and won against the enemy. I don't think that's going to happen here. I don't think it's possible for that to happen here, where we can just have that one day where it's victory, because it's a completely different situation. We kind of already had that day in Afghanistan when we defeated the Taliban and put in place a new government. So if you want a similar victory like that, that victory already happened years ago. But in terms of what the goal is here, frankly, I think, and they're not willing to tell you, the goal is to have a almost permanent presence there, because we have to. And the goal is basically to stay there as long as possible until they're able to secure their own country, until we feel that they can secure their own country.
And perhaps afterwards, because we want to be an influence in the area.
Yeah, and have bases there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just the reality. I know our political leaders don't want to say this. I know Rand Paul doesn't like it. I know a lot of the Trump supporters don't like it, frankly. But I think that's the reality. He continues on here. He says, National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster understands this better than anyone. He says he worked close with the general. He regularly cited the two main drivers of the conflict in Afghanistan as Taliban sanctuary in Pakistan and the endemic corruption and predatory governance that turned Afghans away from their own officials and institutions. He developed a comprehensive plan to help the Afghans improve government capacity, instill rule of law, and tackle widespread graft. All key elements of nation building that President Trump disavowed last night. Last night, he wrote this the day after. While the McMaster plan was overly ambitious and barely implemented, his diagnosis of the problem was accurate, and it's become more acute today. Now, this is another thing I want to admit. Trump said we're not nation building. I think a lot of that's disingenuous, to be honest with you. Do I think we're nation building on the scale of what the plan was in Iraq? No. But to say we're not going to have any influence on what the government of Afghanistan does, that we're just going to let them do what they want to do and we're going to be there and kill terrorists, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. There's no way our military or our government could just allow allow that government to do whatever they want. Because then they could just become a terrorist government if they wanted to. We can't allow them to do that. There's going to be some values, some plans, some things that we're going to push on their government. Some people will call that nation building, but I think it's just the reality of the situation. And I'm just frankly trying to be honest enough to tell you that's what it is. Now, there's a great article here, too, from USA Today that I found today. It's by General John Allen and Michael O'Hanlon. They're contributors to the USA Today. They also commented on Trump's policy in Afghanistan, and I think they were actually pretty frank in what they said in some bold truths that I've been saying on this show for the past week. Here's what it says in the article. It says, there is probably no secret recipe for victory in Afghanistan, at least no such recipe that any American can concoct. President Trump was dealt a tough hand in Afghanistan, and his predecessors and many of us in the strategic community have also learned the United States enjoys only a limited influence in this crucial part of the world. U.S. policy is about improving the odds of success, or at least reducing the odds of failure. At this point, not about ensuring any given outcome. In these trying circumstances, with no great policy options available to him, we would especially commend Mr. Trump for making a difficult and very presidential decision about future American policy. And, this goes back to the whole point of, they say Trump's unable to lead. He's what's the word they've been using lately? He's inept. They basically been saying they need to get the 25th Amendment to get him out of there because he's unstable.
Okay.
And the whole Afghanistan policy proves that he's not. He can make presidential decisions. He has made presidential decisions. Sometimes he gets a little wacky and crazy, but for the most part, when it comes to making these decisions, he makes some pretty good decisions. They continue on here, though. He says, we would distill the main goal of the U.S. policy for the next 3 years to be this: help the Afghan government reverse the momentum of war. Several years ago, the Afghan government controlled more than 70% of the country. Now, according to U.S. intelligence, that figure's down to 60%. They need to try to get it back to 70%. But it will deprive the insurgency and supports of the narrative that victory will soon be theirs. At a minimum, such an achievement would help ensure we can hold on to bases needed to monitor and attack extremists in South Asia. More hopefully, if accomplished, it might lead elements of insurgency to conclude that the fight is no longer worth the effort and pieces of it will split off and reconcile with Kabul. He says they basically say this, and they make some great points overall. But this is how they kind of end it. He says, most of all, we should stay resolute. However alluring the idea of a clear exit strategy may be, it isn't now available to us in this war. It's exactly what I've been saying. We need to avoid giving the Taliban and others reasons to hope, or believe that our presence will be ended before the job is done. If we need to mini-surge by a few thousand troops now and then stay with a more modest presence through much of the 2020s, that is preferable to seeing another sanctuary for ISIS or Al-Qaeda developed on the eastern flank of the broader Middle East region. This mission may have to outlast yet another American president. Trump needn't promise us otherwise. If we are successful in helping defeat extremists and protect the American homeland with a small presence in Afghanistan for years to come, that is still success. I think he's right. I think this article is right by General John Allen and Michael O'Hanlon. That the fact is, we're probably going to stay there through the 2020s. The fact is, it will probably outlast this president. But the fact is, it's really just a modest presence that we have there. That we can make the sacrifice. It's not going to totally bankrupt us. And I think it's just the stark reality. And I think more of our military leaders and more of our leaders just need to face up to this fact. The problem is, it doesn't sound good politically. Because this has been another issue that's been used as a political tool, where people say these political sound bites that we're going to get out or we're going to win and think it's that easy. It's not that easy. It hasn't been that easy for a long time there, and it's not going to happen. So I just wanted to give you some more truths on Afghanistan. If you wanted to hear more of my take on it, I would definitely listen to the podcast from Tuesday night's show, where I talked a lot about it. But I think for the most part, Trump's strategy was pretty good. I think we'll see more specifics as we come along, and I think, frankly, this is just the reality. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. We're going to get into some different issues as well. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio, and I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We've been talking about Afghanistan, and we'll take a call here real quick from our buddy Dale in Orange County. Dale, how are you?
I'm doing fine tonight. How are you?
Pretty good. What's up, man?
Well, I think, if you put the size of Afghanistan in perspective, it's slightly smaller than the state of Texas.
Okay.
So you mean to tell me that in 15 or 16 years we cannot win a war on a country the size of Texas? I mean, if you put enough troops in there, you could go from one side to the other and disarm the whole country. I don't think they have any intentions of ever winning or getting out of that country. They're going to use it as bases. My nephew was over there for 3 tours, and he told me that they did a lot of patrols for American companies to go over there, and they're looking at mining gold and silver and platinum and looking at the natural resources. So I think you're right. I don't think there's any plans of ever getting out of that country.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, you make a good point that if we went there with overwhelming force, with 100,000, 200,000 troops and totally took over that country, we could, easily root out a lot of this stuff. The problem is politically, we're not willing to do that, I think. And I think you're right, too. I think we have a vested interest in staying there for geopolitical reasons, but also making sure of not creating that vacuum. But I also think as well that politically this country would just not allow it to happen. It would just never happen.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's an embarrassment that we cannot go over there and win a war on a country the size of Texas. I ask people all the time, how big do you think Afghanistan is? And I'm shocked. They think it's the size of the United States or bigger. And I'm like, no, it's the size of, and I say, no, it's the size. It's not even the size of Texas. And they're shocked. I said, Google it. You'll see it's 252,000 square miles.
Well,
Texas is 268,000 square miles. So it's really a joke to our military that they can't go over there and do what needs to be done.
Well, the problem is at first they did. When we went in there and, after the 9/11 attacks, we had a lot of troops in there and we totally went in and crushed the enemy and took the Taliban over. But it's different when you talk about kind of keeping the peace. And that would take an incredible military presence for a very lengthy period of time, which we could do and we've done in the past. But it's just the rhetoric in this country from politics is it's just not allowing that to happen. It's just never going to happen, I think.
Well, I think what they need to do is they need to stop all foreign aid to Pakistan, and that might wake them up because Trump's right. I mean, under Hillary Clinton, I believe it was well more than $50 million that we handed over to that country.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it might be in the billions of dollars. But
I'm sure we did it under George W. Bush, too. I'm not surprised.
But I think if you cut it off, and you cut off any of the military aid that you give them, that might wake them up to where they, but who knows, Russia steps in like a vacuum. And
yeah. Plus, I think it's pretty smart. I like what he's doing, trying to use India on our side as well to kind of put pressure on them. Dale, I appreciate your call. Good comments on that. Let's go to Joe in Titusville. Joe, what's your take on this?
Yeah, well, I think people confuse the fact of winning a war and creating a stable environment.
That's true.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was making, yeah.
Right. Winning a war is easy. But, when you start getting into, wanting to carpet bomb, there's a public perception when you see kids dying over there that we're just not willing to stomach, unlike some societies, like Hitler and other people, who were willing to just totally annihilate people and who cares? We won.
Which makes us better in a lot of ways, obviously.
Right. We have a moral compass that says, you just can't do these things.
Although the Russians tried to do that in the 80s and when they invaded, and it didn't work for them either.
Because people confuse topographical of a country, and when you run an insurgent type force. I mean, after you take out the main forces, now you have insurgents, small groups, small bands of people attacking you. They are really hard to find.
Especially in a rough terrain like that, yeah.
Right. They hide, and Afghanistan is really rough. Afghanistan is nothing like Texas.
Right.
It's more like Colorado. Okay?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
So hiding in that I mean, look how long the Indians hid in the hills for, and we tried to take them out for years, but the whole thing is that, and then if you get into Pakistan, you also have to consider the fact that Pakistan and India are like mortal enemies.
Yep.
You know, going back to Muhammad
Well,
Gandhi
and they have
before.
Yeah, and they have nuclear weapons as well.
Right. So, you know, you have to be really careful that if you destabilize, let's say, Pakistan, what happens to those nuclear weapons?
Yeah.
And, you know,
and that's,
it just gets really complicated. And I do like what he did with Trump because he gave Pakistan a way out. He didn't like corner him, yet he's kind of, you know, held out the olive branch to India to say, well, you know, we don't want your military. We want your, you know, aid to build some infrastructure and some businesses there, you know.
And we just want to build a good relationship with them.
Right. And so I think he was very wise in doing it. And I think I talked to you earlier this week on Bud's show that I thought his speech was very good. You know, the problem is, you know, what's his next speech going to be like? You know, so that's the problem that I see with Trump. You know, this speech was really good, and he's got a good, you know, military footprint in our government, and
there's no,
you know, it has chances.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate your call. Yeah, there's no doubt that when it comes to the military, he's just willing to really do. He's not micromanaging the military, and I don't think he has any intention of doing that. It made a lot of good points there. You know, that was kind of one of my biggest frustrations with the war in Iraq, because people would say we lost the war in Iraq, we need to get out of Iraq when that was all going on. But the problem is there was 2 wars in Iraq. There was the first war against Saddam Hussein's army, which we defeated very quickly. And then there was the second war of the insurgency and Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And people were saying when we were having problems with the insurgency, that we should have just pulled out. And I always had a problem with that, because even if you were originally against the war in Iraq at the beginning, we were fighting a different war in the end, and that was the war against Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And we used to all agree that was the enemy, and we should have defeated that enemy in Iraq. But as Joe said, we're not honest. We're not honest about these situations a lot of times. And that's exactly what's going on in Afghanistan. When you talk about victory, we had swift victory in the beginning against the Taliban. So to say, well, this is America's longest war, that's almost not really correct. Because, yes, we've been in there a long time, but we're not fighting the same war that we started. Now we're fighting for stabilization, and we're fighting a counterinsurgency. And we're fighting terrorist groups over there. And that's different than a conventional war. And that's going to take time and patience, which George W. Bush, in the beginning, when he made the speech after 9/11, he warned the country. He said this would take a long time to get through. This would take a lot of patience to get through. And unfortunately, our country doesn't seem to have that, because we're using it as a political tool. So some very good points, very good calls there. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. Once again, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on until 10 p.m. tonight, right here live on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. A couple of you have liked the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page tonight. If you're listening just now, you can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, and you can see the Facebook Live video there. I'm always posting the videos of all the shows. You can catch the podcasts anywhere podcasts are available. Go to beyondreasonradio.com. You can catch that as well. Or you can follow me on Twitter at BeyondReasonR. By the way, if you go to beyondreasonradio.com, you can find stuff some other stuff I do. For one, I produce the morning show and co-host the morning show here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. I also co-host and produce the Florida Roundtable, which plays on the weekends all over the state of Florida. And we have some great discussions on that show. This week we talked to a political analyst named Ed Pizzuoli, but we a lot of times talk to authors, and we a lot of times talk to historians and other different kinds of experts. It's a great show, And you can find the link to the podcast for the Florida Roundtable on my page as well. So I want to get into something that I've actually kind of had in the bank for a couple of days, but it's something that's kind of been on my mind recently, and it's something where I actually disagree a lot with some Republicans. And there's some audio here that I have from Representative Trent Franks of Arizona. Now, he joined President Trump at the campaign rally in Phoenix, Arizona earlier this week, and he's a big supporter of Trump, and he was on Fox. And he was talking about what he thinks is the only way we're going to be able to pass Trump's agenda. And this is something, he's not the first one who has said this. I've actually heard more Trump supporters, more Republicans, frankly, more conservatives, frankly, say this is what we need to do. And I'm not sure I can go down this road. So let's listen to the audio here as he talks about, go ahead and play that for me, Tom Benson.
Challenge is there would never be any discussion about shutting down the government if it weren't for the fact that the Democrats in the Senate on a regular basis take this entire process hostage through the filibuster, and that's what causes the shutdown. In other words, there are certain times when appropriation funds run out as of a matter of law, and then Democrats won't let another appropriations bill to the Senate except the one that they want. So consequently, they take the entire process hostage, and that's what causes the shutdown. That's what people don't understand. And I just have to tell you, Shannon, if everybody else could forget everything else I say in this interview, if we're going to drain the swamp in Washington, we have to pull the plug on the Senate filibuster. It is the only hope for us to get accountable clarity in our appropriations process.
And it's something the president called for last night. It's something the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has said, no way, they're not going to do. So where does that leave you?
Well, Senator McConnell said that about the process for appointing justices, too. He said that they would never change the rules. So that debate is over. He saw very clearly that the American people wouldn't countenance the notion that after President Trump appointed perhaps the most qualified Supreme Court justice in a century, that now somehow he was going to have to come back and tell the American people, I'm sorry, even though the election was about the Constitution and about the Supreme Court, we're not going to be able to give this guy a fair up or down vote. He knew the people wouldn't stand for it. So the filibuster was exposed at that point, and they changed it to a person. Every person that said they would never vote to change it did exactly that. So the debate really is over.
So I'm hearing more and more calls to do exactly what Mr. Franks here, Representative Franks, is calling for. They are calling for an end to the Senate filibuster. They think the Senate filibuster gets in the way of being able to get things done in the Senate. This is something I hear all the time. We need the Senate to get things done. We need Congress to get things done. And I tell you, this is one of those things where I just don't agree with them on it. I do not think we should get rid of the filibuster. Why? Now, why is that? Well, for one, I want to caveat that a little bit. I do think we should get rid of it in terms of judicial appointments and cabinet appointments, because those are things that the president needs to get done pretty quickly when he gets into office, and there needs to be an up and down vote to get those people in place in order for the executive branch to work, especially judicial appointments. And when you start filibustering all judicial appointments, you have a problem. So that was a big reason why I supported McConnell in nuking the filibuster rule for the judicial appointments to get Gorsuch in place, and I think he's done it for others. Now, really, when McConnell did that, he was just copying what the Democrats had done in the past for other judicial appointments. But this is a debate that happens, it seems like every time there's a change in power of Congress, this is a debate that happens. So when the Democrats are in power, but they don't have the supermajority, then they want to kill the filibuster rule. Now that the Republicans are in power, but they don't have the supermajority, then they want to kill the filibuster rule. It's something that always goes back and forth. Now, Mitch McConnell and the Senate leadership have already said they're not going to do this. They're not going to get rid of the filibuster. Now, why is that? Because they know eventually that they're not going to be in power. They know eventually Republicans will be in the minority again, and the Republicans will need the filibuster to stop some of the agenda of the other side. The point of the filibuster is this. The reason why I support the filibuster is because I don't think it should be easy necessarily for the Senate and Congress to get things done. We all want to live in this ideal world where Congress is constantly just passing bills and the Senate is just passing bills, and we're just getting so many things done. I often fear Congress and the Senate and everybody off getting too much done, because a lot of times when they get too much done, it ends up hurting the country more than it helps it.
And with them on vacation for most of August, we were safe.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. You know, some people think they should work more days. No, take as much vacation as you want. You know, I don't want you in there. Usually when they're in power, they just use it to take away more of our money and more of our liberty and to grow government. But the fact is, this is always this hypocritical talk because, you know, there are people, and I know they've all been in Congress, that when they're not in power, they love the filibuster. But then when they are in power, they hate the filibuster. But the point is, in limited government, it's not supposed to be easy, always easy to get things done. And this is one of those things where it's like, you set that precedent, you're going to hate it eventually because the other side is eventually going to get in power again. And there's really a real reason why we're not getting a lot done in Congress. The real reason is not the filibuster or anything else. A lot of it, frankly, is us, the people. The Senate is a reflection of the divide in the country right now. The fact is, the country is very polarized and very divided on a lot of issues. You have in some issues they can compromise and get along because they can agree, they can have common ground. But there are so many big issues now where it is very hard to get common ground because you have this very big divide right now in the country. Spending is a big example. You have one side that wants to cut a lot of the domestic spending, and then you have the other side who wants to cut a lot of military spending. And this is hard. When you have $20 trillion in debt, it's hard to start compromising on that. Usually they do compromise and just spend more on both, which is a problem. But that's an example of an issue. And then you have things like healthcare. You have one side that's calling more and more for more government control of healthcare. More and more people on that side are calling for socialist medicine, nationalized healthcare. And then you have the other side who wants more free market solution, who wants government out of the way. When you have issues like that, where 50% of the country completely disagrees, totally with the other 50%, that's why you're not getting all this stuff done in Congress. It's easy to blame the filibuster and saying, well, this is why we're not getting stuff done. But that's really not the reason. The reason is the people. The reason is the country. The reason is we are very polarized and we are very divided now because we're trying to figure out what's the best direction for the future of this country. And right now, unfortunately, you have two different ideas on what that future entails. And that's where we are. But if you start talking about getting rid of the filibuster rule, you're going to regret it in the future. Now, I have had this guy on Facebook who, if he's listening, I have to tell him, I appreciate him sending me messages, but he'll send me a message, and then I'll put that message on every post on my Facebook and then on the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page that has nothing to do with what the actual post was about. That's kind of annoying. If you're going to comment on something I post on my social media, make it related to what I post. Don't just post on everything because you're so desperate for attention. If you want to send me a message on something and you want to have an actual conversation about it, then just send me the message and I'll talk about it on the show. But you don't need to post it on everything because then it just seems like you're a troll and it gets annoying. But he did bring up a good point. He says what we should do as a middle ground in this filibuster debate is we should end the virtual filibuster. So with the new rules, they have something that's called kind of a virtual filibuster where the Senate can do many things at one time, and you don't actually have to have someone. In the old days of the filibuster, you actually had to have people talking continuously, and that was an actual filibuster where one person was talking and talking and talking so the debate would continue on, or you had several different people take turns and they talked and talked and talked so the debate would continue on until people stopped talking anymore. Now they sort of have a Senate rule through the virtual filibuster where they don't actually have to have that. They can just kind of say it's a filibuster and the Senate moves on to other things without actually having to keep talking. He's saying the middle ground is to end the virtual filibuster, but keep the traditional filibuster. Now, right now, you can end a filibuster with a cloture vote of 60 votes. So keep that, he says, end the virtual filibuster, and then keep the traditional filibuster. I actually think that's a pretty good compromise. Because when you think about it, the virtual filibuster is kind of a cop-out. You know, it used to be if you're going to filibuster, you should sit there and debate and actually put up with the actual filibuster. Otherwise, you don't get to filibuster. So I had to think about that a little bit. And maybe I have to think about it a little bit more. I don't think it's ever going to happen because, frankly, both sides are not really willing to give up the filibuster for the reason I just told you, because they know they're not going to be in the majority forever. But I think that actually is a pretty good compromise. If you're going to filibuster, you got to do it Rand Paul or Ted Cruz style and actually get up there and stay up there and debate and filibuster until you run out of things to say. It's the way it used to be. It's the way it should be. So I think that actually is a pretty interesting idea. Something getting off my chest because I see too many Republicans. It's such a hypocritical thing. Because as soon as we're in the minority, they'll love the filibuster. But now they want to get rid of it. Careful what you wish for. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. We're going to end the show with things that made Yaffee laughy. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We've been doing the show since 8 p.m. If you missed any of the show, make sure to check out the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. You can download the Beyond Reason Radio app. You can go to beyondreasonradio.com, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, iTunes, and all that good stuff on Facebook Live as well. Just go like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. So before we get into the last thing, Tom Benson, have you gotten into the NFL lately? Are you in the NFL?
The NFL? I mean the National Football League?
Yes. I don't know what else that would.
No. As time marches on and so many players are getting wiggy over this national anthem thing, I'm just ready to, write off the entire season.
Really?
Absolutely. I'll watch college.
Now, were you into it before, though?
I had favorite teams. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I always used to root for the PA team that was playing.
Oh, you're from Pennsylvania.
But overall, it's always great to go.
You'll love this story then, but go ahead.
It's always great to go for the underdog, root for the underdog.
But you used to like to watch it.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, who doesn't like to watch football? Yeah. But now you're really kind of sick of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you're one of those people. You're kind of an example of people stop watching because of that.
I am.
Wow. I mean, polls show that that's a big reason why people stopped watching.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it continues to get worse, because people don't want to deal with politics when they're watching football.
They want it, right. They want it to be an escapism, not have it thrown in their face again.
Yeah, they're sort of biting the hand that feeds them, All right. Well, my Laffy segment is actually kind of NFL related. That's why I was asking. It's time for things that made Yaffee laughy. So you said you're from Pennsylvania, so that means you would sometimes cheer for the Philadelphia Eagles, right?
Absolutely, or the Steelers. And if they happen to be playing each other, I'd go with the Steelers.
Okay, good. Eagles fans. I can't. Well, check out this, what I got from newser.com.
Uh-huh.
Philadelphia Eagles fan gets last laugh with obituary. This is great. He asked for 8 members of the team to carry the casket to let him down one last time. So true if you're an Eagles fan. They've gotten close way too much. And
did anybody take him up on it? Did any of the Eagles take him?
I don't know. Let's see here. It says a New Jersey man took a parting shot of the Philadelphia Eagles in his obituary. Jeffrey Regal, 56, died last Friday. Before his death, the Port Republican man promised friends a funny message in his obituary. The longtime Eagles fan's obituary asked for Regal to have 8 Philadelphia Eagles as pallbearers so the Eagles can let him down one last time. Says he was a passionate Eagles fan who owned season tickets for more than 30 years. Sadly, the Eagles never won a Super Bowl during his lifetime. Well, you think about that. That's got to be
that's pretty bad.
Soul crushing.
Yeah.
Even I've had, I'm a Bucs fan. Even they've won a Super Bowl in my lifetime. As bad as they are today.
Can you just imagine the money? 30 years of season tickets. Whew.
That's a great point.
Oh man.
Yeah, my brother just bought season tickets for the Cowboys. He's a big Cowboys fan. Talk about another team that's been letting people down the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a lot of money. I don't know if people can afford it. I definitely can't. Says it was not always an easy team to love. His wife said she sometimes suggests pay allegiance to a different team. According to her, I just can't, was his response. Regal's friend tells Press of Atlantic City he couldn't help but laugh at his friend's humor. 8 friends wearing Eagles jerseys were to lay Regal to rest on Thursday at St. Paul's United Methodist Church Cemetery in Port Republic. Regal did get to see the Eagles win one last time before his death. He saw last Thursday's 20-16 preseason victory of the Buffalo Bills. He got to see them go out and win, his wife said, suggesting that may have been what he needed to make peace with death. I would hope there would be more that he would need than to watch the Eagles win. Man, Eagles fans, you're crazy. You Eagles fans out there. A spokesman for the Eagles declined to comment about Regal's request. Oh, they should let him. They should do it. Oh, man, that'd be a great PR bit if the Eagles actually went out and did that. I guess they'd have to concede, though, how big of losers they are. I'm just saying, yeah, I'd rather cheer for the Steelers, too. Not really a big fan of either, but Eagles fans are just, kind of annoying. You're even agreeing in there. Yep. All right. I appreciate you. I appreciate you all listening to the show tonight. Make sure, if you're in the path of the hurricane, to stay safe. Hopefully we won't have to deal with something similar here soon. And, I appreciate you listening. Have a great weekend. Make sure to check out the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. And, catch you guys next time.
Conscience knowing so well that nothing comes from indifference. I look inside